This is not normal. Kansas and Oklahoma hit by a number of earthquakes. 65 quakes in 7 days. This is not normal. Tyler Durden's Zero Hedge, authored by Michael Schneider via the End of the American Dream blog. Well, we found out a little while ago, just a couple of days ago, that the Puget Sound, Seattle fault, that is a very strong fault that gives megaquakes of over 8 magnitude, and that's overdue for a big one, by the way, from what the USGS geologists are telling us. That fault runs all the way diagonally through Yellowstone, all the way across the United States, all the way across Oklahoma, Kansas, down to the New Madrid seismic zone, which is a rift valley, by the way. That is, it's opening up, and it intersects there with the Reelfoot Rift. It's coming from the Mississippi River, and there's also volcanoes down there, by the way, and it comes up all the way through New Madrid, all the way up to the side, the east of the Great Lakes, through Ottawa, through Montreal, up the St. Lawrence River and into the St. Lawrence Seaway. So throughout Canada that way on the east. That will one day open up, splitting the East Coast from the United States mainland, the continent, just like the Great Rift Valley of Africa. That's opening up too, that's splitting, and that Rift Valley in Africa, by the way, goes all the way up through the Jordan, through the Red Sea, the Dead Sea, up through the Jordan River, up through to the Sea of Galilee, all the way up through to Turkey. And we also noted that the Sea of Galilee has a volcano at the bottom of it because they found basalt coming out of it, which is, of course, volcanic material. So that is a rift valley from the Great Rift Valley of Africa going all the way up. That is also a prophecy that rift valley will open at the second coming, splitting the Mount of Olives from Jerusalem. The Kidron Valley will be split right there. You can imagine the great devastation that will cause all around the Mediterranean area as well. Tremendous devastation. And in the past, they have had 8 and 9 magnitude quakes there in the Middle East, in Israel, and with tsunamis, of course, and they are overdue for a big earthquake there. If you'll see the videos, just a few before this one. And now we're talking about this. A tremendous amount of earthquakes in Kansas and Oklahoma. Okay, that's to be expected because the pressure coming from the west is traveling all the way down. You can even see that fault line on Google Earth clearly marked. If you follow with your eyes the lines from Seattle all the way down across, diagonally from northwest to southeast, and at Kansas and at New Madrid, Missouri, right there is where the intersection is. That's where you have a lot of those earthquakes in a T formation where those two fault lines intersect and are interlocked. Okay? So, what are we supposed to think when rather large earthquakes start happening in places that are not supposed to have large earthquakes? We even have them going on in Canada, in Saskatchewan and Alberta. Out of nowhere, without any foreshocks. Boom, 4.2 comes out of nowhere. How is that? Now, in 2019, it has been quite a year for seismic activity already. We've had the ridge crest and the earthquakes here at the Garlic Fault in the Kosovo volcanic field, even though that was a moderate to no threat at all, as indicated by USGS last year when they came out with their high threat volcano listing. And yet we had that earthquake swarm there, and it's still ongoing, and as a matter of fact, it has even, in the past, caused earthquake swarms to take place in Yellowstone supervolcano. There was a Ridgecrest earthquake 20 years ago, August 1999, of the same magnitude, 7.1, and a couple of weeks later it caused Yellowstone to have earthquake swarms. Also, the Denali, Alaska volcano earthquake caused an earthquake swarm at Yellowstone. The 8.8 magnitude Chile quake caused earthquake swarm in Yellowstone, and the Haiti earthquake caused earthquake swarms in Yellowstone. Now, how is Yellowstone affected by all these, which are so far away? Well, Ridgecrest is somehow connected, because recently we found, from what the geologist USGS has told us, there's a magma plume at the US-Mexico coast, and it's splitting into Yellowstone and the west coast with the high-threat volcanoes. So that magma plume sits, I guess, very close to the causal volcanic field. And it could be that these earthquakes there at Ridgecrest are volcanic earthquakes. It's also a subduction zone, so take your pick. It's a subduction zone. There's a plate lodged underneath Yellowstone. It's causing the magma to sort of go sideways vertically towards the west. And you could understand how much pressure there is there. Now, we have the causal volcanic Ridgecrest quakes taking place at the Walker Lane fault system. The Walker Lane, which, for example, begins at the East California seismic zone at Ridgecrest, takes up 25% of the subduction pressure. The other 75% is taken up by San Andreas fault. The Walker Lane fault system, after California sinks into the Pacific, Walker Lane will be the coastline of the continental United States sometime in the very far off future. And the Walker Lane fault system is locked in with the Garlic fault of Ridgecrest, which locks in with the San Andreas, and the Walker Lane goes all the way up northwest, nudging into the Cascadia Arc. That's why perhaps the Vancouver earthquake of July 3rd, 13 hours of 6.2 magnitude, 13 hours later, gave us a Ridgecrest earthquake of 6.4 on July 4th, and then the 7.1 on July 5th. Vancouver earthquakes have given Ridgecrest earthquakes in the past. This happened in 2015. Again, a 6.2 magnitude off Vancouver Island gave Ridgecrest a mid-sized earthquake, I think, if I remember correctly, about 3.5 magnitude, 24 hours later. So it's not the first time that Vancouver has given Ridgecrest earthquakes. Perhaps it's because the Cascadia Arc is locked and pressed in with the Walker Lane fault system, and the pressure is released right there at Ridgecrest, which happens to be a volcanic area, which happens to have one of the largest geothermal plants in the country at the naval base in China Lake, and there's a magma chamber right under there. That's why they're getting the geothermal energy. So now we're having these earthquake swarms, and they're pretty large. Some of them are 4.2. I think one was like 5 point something, lowered to a 4.6. And I shouldn't laugh. They're getting big. And a lot of people are saying, okay, they're man-induced. No, if they're man-made, they should be stopping the fracking, because these are getting too big. They can't all be man-made earthquakes from fracking. So that's, I guess, stories for the wind to sort of pacify people. Oh, don't worry about it, they're fracking earthquakes. That's not so. They can't all be fracking earthquakes. They're too big and there's swarms everywhere. And also, they happen to be on the largest fracture fault line in the country, from northeast to the New Madrid seismic zone, over 2,200 miles. So you can see my previous videos on that, and you can get a lot more detailed information. It's all based on fact, of course. It's not out of our minds. Now, 2019 seismic activity, of course, as we know, especially with the ridge crest still going on in coastal volcanic field in California. So Michael Snyder goes on with his article saying, after this 2019 unexpected earthquake activity, especially in the United States, he says, I understand that we should expect to see earthquakes in diverse places, but if someone told me that the U.S. was just hit by a significant quake, one of the last places I would check would be Kansas. The state of Kansas is certainly known for a lot of things, but earthquakes are not one of them. That's why what we just witnessed is so startling. According to the Kansas City Star, one county in central Kansas alone has been hit by 11 quakes within the past 5 days. The county in central Kansas experienced a pretty shocking uptick in seismic activity last week, 11 earthquakes in 5 days. It started with a magnitude 2.4 earthquake Wednesday morning, just 2.5 miles southwest of Hutchinson, Kansas. That's north of Wichita, by the way. In Reno County, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, there would be 10 more before the week was out. It's a swarm. And 2.5, but that's also the latest one was 4.2. The biggest one of the group hit Friday morning. It was originally reported to be 4.2, but it was later downgraded to 4.1. Due to the geology of the region, earthquakes in the middle of the country are often felt more acutely. And this particular earthquake was powerful enough to shake buildings off the shelves of people's homes. It shook things off the shelves of people's homes. Tim Black, who lives in Hutchinson, told the TV station his house shook and things fell off the walls. Hutchinson resident Alice Hinnon said things fell off shelves in her home. She said she has felt earthquakes before, but this is the strongest one yet. KWCH said people across Kansas felt this earthquake. Quote, we've heard reports from people as far away as Topeka, Hays, Arkansas City, and into even northern Oklahoma. That's what the station said on its website. Further south, Oklahoma experienced even more earthquakes than Kansas has over the past 7 days. Overall, there has been a total of 65 earthquakes between the two states over the past week. That definitely is not normal, and we should keep a close eye on this. Meanwhile, we're also seeing more unusual seismic activity out on the west coast. In fact, a magnitude 5.4 earthquake hit Cascadia subduction zone, again off the coast of Oregon. We know that there is a volcano out there, Blanco Fracture Zone. A couple of years ago, they found that there is a volcano. It's not just the axial seamount. Besides the axial seamount on the Juan de Fuca, the Blanco Fracture Zone also has an offshore volcano closer to the coast. So, the magnitude 5.4 trembler struck at 8:23 a.m., more than 200 miles west of Coos Bay, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. The quake hit at a depth of roughly 7 miles. People on the west coast did report feeling it. Earthquakes are not uncommon in the area, which sees frequent seismic activity as tectonic plates meet and shift and crumble under one another. The Cascadia subduction zone, a series of faults that runs parallel to the coast from Northern California to British Columbia, is expected to produce a massive quake that could devastate the region. Even the Ridgecrest quakes, the geologists, especially Dr. Lucy Jones, warned us, does not stop the big one from coming. That's a total different issue. The Ridgecrest quakes do not mitigate or lessen the big one that is to hit the lower San Andreas fault area around Los Angeles. So it's always alarming, Snyder goes on to say, whenever a quake rattles the Cascadia subduction zone, because scientists tell us that someday a monster event will produce a giant tsunami that can wipe out the coastal areas up and down the west coast. For much more on this, you can see his previous article titled, You Have Been Warned. Experts tell us that a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake and tsunami will destroy everything west of Interstate 5. But more than anywhere else, he says, I'm deeply concerned about the California coastal line right now. According to Earthquake Track, there have been 2,801 earthquakes of at least magnitude 1.5 in the state of California in the last month. If the earthquakes remain small, that won't be too much of a problem. But one day the big one is going to hit and all of our lives will instantly be changed. Of course, many Californians like to mock the idea of the big one that is coming, but physicist Michio Kaku of City University in New York told CBS News, actually he was on the newscast on live television the morning of the July 4th earthquake, warning of a big California quake. So anyway, he was on the news, and he says it was actually way overdue. He says we're playing Russian roulette with Mother Nature. This is what Michio Kaku said on CBS News. He says you realize the last big earthquake to hit LA segment of the San Andreas Fault was in 1680, Kaku said, according to the network. That's over 300 years ago. But the cycle time for breaks and earthquakes on San Andreas is 130 years, so we're way overdue, he said. In fact, Kaku insists that the probability that it will happen within the next 30 years is about 100%. He says in 30 years' time, the probability of the big one is about 100%, Kaku said. So we will see the big one. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's the law of physics, he says. For those living in Southern California, it's kind of like living with a time bomb, but you can't actually see the timer. Sadly, one day time will run out and it will be catastrophic. The following comes from one of my previous articles. It says, hopefully it will not happen anytime soon, but seismologists assure us that it's only a matter of time before the big one strikes. They have repeatedly warned us that the San Andreas Fault is locked and loaded and that it has the potential to unzip all at once. And when that day finally arrives, scientists have determined that the ground level could drop by 3 feet, and that would result in vast portions of Southern California suddenly being covered by the Pacific Ocean. 3 feet? 3 feet is already what happened in Ridgecrest. 3 feet. The western part went up 3 feet at that crack that they showed us the aerial of, the infrared crack by NASA. So we saw that the western part of the crack went up 3 feet, and it was higher than the eastern, which was lower by 3 feet. So it will unzip, and the ground level can drop by 3 feet. We've already seen that. We live at a time, he says, when our planet is becoming increasingly unstable, and we're witnessing major earthquakes and enormous volcanic eruptions all over the globe on a daily basis. Tremendous earth changes. He says, I've been thinking about the coming California earthquake a lot today. The people living there have been warned over and over again, and they know the risks. And only 13% of all California homeowners actually have earthquake insurance. So when they lose their homes, they're really going to lose their homes. Our planet is rocking and rolling, and the warning signs are very clear. Let's hope for the best, but the truth is that the Californians are already living on borrowed time, and eventually there will be no more grace period. He's talking about the big one, of course. I'll leave links below for you for this. This is on Zero Hedge. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.